agenda now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Utility, Cable, Telecommunications, and Technology Committee meeting Monday, February 14th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Agenda. Item 1, roll call. Item 2, approval of the minutes, October 25th, 2021. Item 3, presentation, E&O customer billing. Entergy New Orleans, LLC, E&O, will present on recent reports of increases in customer bills. Item 4, presentation, 2021 Mardi Gras outage investigation. The council's utility advisors will present on their investigation into the events surrounding Winter Storm Uri and the resulting outages. Item 5, resolution, E&O financing application. The committee will consider a resolution to approve E&O's application to incur additional debt. Item 6, presentation, CURO report. The Council Utilities Regulatory Office, CURO, Chief of Staff and Council will provide an update on CURO's accomplishments, initiatives, and staff expansion. Item 7, adjournment. Councilmember, that is the agenda.
Okay, at this time, we will adjourn for 10 minutes for the reading of public comment, at which point we'll return and proceed with the agenda. So we are recessing for public comments. Thank you.
Council members, it is 10:16. We can resume whenever you're ready.
But I'm joining as a participant.
Let's wait to make sure we have a quorum, then we'll get started, Aaron.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Chair Morrell,
Yeah.
present. Sorry.
Thank
Councilmember
you.
Moreno,
Present.
Councilmember DeRusso,
Here.
Councilmember King, Councilmember Thomas. Chair Morrell, we have 3 members. We have a quorum.
Okay. With that, why don't we start with the approval of the minute? So I have the minutes from the October 25th meeting. Mr. Caruso will move that we approve the minutes. The council president will second. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. I think the first presentation we have today, Aaron, is from ENO regarding customer billing.
Yes, sir. Entergy, you're welcome to share your screen for your presentation.
Oh, you're still muted, ENO.
Councilmember Spears, Ms. Spears, I'm here, sorry.
Welcome, Councilmember King.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Deanna Rodriguez, and I just wanted to at least open up the meeting from our team. And this is the first meeting of this council. And so, first of all, I wanted to congratulate all of you for having been elected and now in the service that you're providing to the city. I know that you all have a lot of other things that you all do and that are your responsibilities, but I commend you for what you've taken on in this role as a regulator of Entergy New Orleans. So thank you for that. And then I also wanted to commit to you that we will be here to be as responsive or as we know how to be. We'll always be forthright. You'll hear news from us, whether good or bad. You'll hear it directly from me and from my team. So with that, I won't be attending all of your meetings, but I know that I will leave you in good hands with Courtney Nicholson and Sandra Miller. And so I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. But thanks again. So good morning.
Thank you. Who's handling the presentation? I'm assuming it's Courtney or Sandra?
It is Courtney, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good morning, council members. We're aware that there seems to have been some increased discussions about customer frustrations with billing issues. And some of those include complaints about incorrect bills. So the council asked us to be prepared to talk about that today. And we appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion because we do share the council's concern. Certainly when we saw some of the recent posts and media coverage on billing issues, we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to talk about this with you all. At the outset, we have the agenda for the presentation here, but at the outset, I'll say that we'll try to be informative.
Oh, Courtney, you went out. Your sound went out.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So I was saying at the outset, we'll try to be informative without revealing too much customer sensitive information in a public forum. We do have a customer bill of rights that sort of prohibits us from talking about too much detail about customer, private information. But with that in mind, I've asked our team to try to corral this discussion around the processes that we have in place, and just to give the council and the public an overview of the performance of our billing system, some of the key controls that have been implemented, and some of the forward-looking process improvements that we're targeting as part of a larger effort that we have at the company to improve our customers' experiences. So I have with me today Leslie Dennis, who's the director of our meter to cash in our billing department. Some additional billing process that our customers' trust is important to us. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Our customers' trust is important to us, and we've made substantial improvements that Leslie will talk about over the last couple of years to improve our billing processes to provide a positive experience for our customers and to deliver timely and accurate invoices. That's our goal. So now I'll turn it over to Leslie for additional details.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay? All right, my name is Leslie Dennis, like Courtney mentioned, and I've been with Entergy for about 3 years. However, I do have 15 years of utility experience, and I am the director over the meter to cash organization, which includes the billing department as well. Entergy New Orleans has a 99.1 billing accuracy rate, and while this represents less than 1% of the errors, we do recognize that these issues have a negative impact on our customers, and improvement in this area is critical. When thinking about the billing process, it is important to think about the process from an end-to-end perspective. It's more than just the billing calculation. This is only one small component of the process. The process actually begins when we're talking about the customer's service. And it's critical that we think about it from the meter installation and making sure that we capture the customer usage accurately. Once the meter is installed, there are many system integrations that transmits the data between the meter and the billing system. Over the last year, we have really made great strides in improving the end-to-end billing process by adding various controls to reduce the number of errors that we have seen, implementing an industry standard work management system and several technology solutions to increase our billing accuracy and the timeliness percentage, increasing the number of accounts that we audit to identify potential training gaps so that we provide real-time coaching to our billing clerks. And I mentioned again, it's less than 1%. And within this 1%, many of these errors are caught even before the bill gets to the customer. Finally, there are some key internal controls that flag potential billing exceptions. These controls will kick out a customer account for a manual review if the customer invoice varies outside of certain parameters. We have a daily report that flags invoices when it exceeds a given threshold, which is based off of the customer type. We recognize that we may have some human performance errors, which we are through the that we provide billing clerks. Now I'll turn it over to Sandra for additional information.
On mute, Sandra.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. As you know, I'm the technology deficient one, as usual. So let's try this again. Good morning, council members. Again, my name is Sandra Dick Miller. To those of you all who I have not met in person, and I echo Deanna's congratulations to the new council members who are now in position. I may not have met all of you all in person, but I know you all are already working with my teams to work on customer concerns, and I hope to visit with you all soon in person, those that I have not met in person. But before we conclude, I wanted to tie in how these issues relate to Entergy's broader efforts to enhance the customer experience. We recognize that our customers' expectations are evolving at a pace that admittedly outpaces the level of engagement we are providing as a company. The billing complaints that we've seen are certainly a byproduct of that. While we only are just shy of 1% billing accuracies, we still have work to do, as Leslie indicated. Last year, Entergy established a new business unit specifically aimed at delivering extraordinary customer experiences while also bringing market innovative solutions to keep pace with evolving customer needs and expectations. I think some of our current council officers were in position when we made that announcement regarding this new organization. And we've already seen improvements in service delivery that has improved our customer experience. For example, under this new organization, we've increased our number of agents in our call centers, assisting our customers with moments that matter, some of the more complex transactions that our customers call into us about. And we will continue to add additional agents incrementally over the next few months. And as we've made these staffing adjustments, we've seen wait times consistently below 120 seconds since mid-December. We recognize that our way of conducting business and engaging with our customers must evolve in line with our customers' needs, whether it be billing matters, our call center, or our outage map. This new organization is exclusively devoted to executing on enhancements that will greatly improve our customers' experience, and we look forward to continuing to share with the council regarding the work of this organization and positive outcomes for our customers. And I thank you, and I'll turn the meeting back over to Courtney.
All right, thank you, Sandra. So I hope this was helpful. What we wanted to do and wanted to communicate today is partially that the billing process is very complex. It involves several inputs, and that, that we've implemented some key process controls and have some in place, and improvements are underway that have led to a 99.1% billing accuracy rate. And I hope to see that improve with some of the processes that Sandra was just talking about in the new organization that will be working on these sorts of issues for our customers. We're investing significant resources into improving our overall customer experiences, not just with billing, but with an array of customer-facing tools. So with that, I'll note also, generally speaking, what we've seen in some of the recent reports about billing issues, it's that these issues are much more nuanced than they sometimes appear when you just see the complaint itself. Much more nuanced than customers just receiving a high bill, right? We certainly, have an array of, it depends based on the customer what the actual issue is, and you dig into those issues. We found a number of, in some cases, they weren't actually billing errors, is what I'm trying to communicate. So with that, I certainly encourage customers to reach out to us directly. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that we walk through any questions about your bill that you may have, and also direct you, if applicable, to Power to Care, some of the processes that we have in place and some of the offerings that we have to help customers. So we have Power to Care, LIHEAP, and other tools that might be helpful to customers when they have these billing issues or high bills. And same with the council members. I know it's difficult for you guys when you're getting these complaints from constituents to really see the full picture like we can. So we're certainly here for you as well to bounce any issues that you receive and dig into those. So again, I hope this is helpful. And now I will open the floor for questions if you guys have any.
Okay, I think we will start with Councilmember Giarrusso, then Moreno, then Thomas. So Mr. Giarrusso, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'll say this as the former chair of the Public Works Committee, seeing somebody has 99.1% billing accuracy is unusual for me. So relative to Sewage and Water Board, I am happy to see that. I want to just mechanically talk, though, about how this is working. So two things. If somebody calls and says, I have a high bill, what does that process look like? Are they directed to somebody? How long does it take? So let's start there. And then I want to ask if they report on social media how it works.
So Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. So let me start out there, Councilmember Giarrusso. I apologize there.
Hey, Sandra,
yes.
Before you get started, why don't we take down the full screen presentation just so that people who are watching on YouTube can see the interactions? Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Excellent idea. Excellent idea. And now I can see everyone as well. So Councilmember Jeruso, thank you for your question. Yes, if a customer calls in about a high bill, there is a process by which, number one, we will take a look at the bill to understand usage, prior usage, current usage. If there are concerns about the meter, we'll definitely have someone to go out and take a look at the meter. My apologies. My earphone just fell out of my ear. And so that's a part of the process, and that's documented through our system. Now, how long it takes really depends on the situation. You know, a customer may call in about a high bill, and once we walk them through their usage, and they may have an understanding, hey, look, this is actually accurate according to the information the customer is seeing, and it could be a quick resolution. If we have to go out to the customer's location, see what's going on with the meter, it could take a little longer than that, but I can't give you a specific, hey, it's going to take X number of days, but we do, make sure that if your offices contact us, we are getting in contact with those customers within 24 hours. If they're calling our call centers, they're taking action, almost immediately to make sure they can move that customer along through the process. Regarding social media, and I will tell you that our teams are very active on social media. If there's something that is posted on social media, we take pride in making sure we're reaching out to those customers to understand what their concerns are, and we are referring them to our internal groups that can directly, speak with those customers to get resolutions. You'd be surprised how quickly, we are making sure that we're responding to customers in that space. And so, yeah, we are watching that space as well.
Thank you. And Sandra, when somebody from Energy calls a customer back, does it say Joe Smith on there or Jane Smith, Energy? How do they know that Energy is returning the phone call?
Well, a couple of things. Yes, typically if they're calling from the Entergy number, or especially internally, it will say it's coming from an Entergy line, and so the customer will know. I will say, admittedly, during COVID, we had some customer service employees who were working remotely from their phones that came up as an undisclosed number, but they would always leave a message and always let the customer know that they were calling from Entergy so that they could identify them. Now that we're all more back in the office working together, that issue should be resolved.
All right. Thank you very much. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Next, we have Council President Moreno.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Sandra, you may be the one to answer this question, but I'll give it to the team, and I'm going to stay in the AMI vein. Did you all do an analysis of overall effectiveness of the AMI meters to make sure that they were operating accurately? Was there some type of analysis or study done? And if you could refresh my memory on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And if Leslie wants to jump in as well. But I think I know exactly what you're asking from our previous conversations, that prior to an AMI meter being installed, they are analyzed and inspected for accuracy to make sure they're operating and performing correctly. And so once they are installed, if there are any meters that are determined to be performing incorrectly or inaccurately, we will do another analysis to, once they're in that location. You never know how they're going to perform when they interact with the customer systems, right? So you also have to pay attention as well. But there is definitely a robust analysis on the front end of those meters before they are installed. And we're pretty much 100% deployed in the city of New Orleans, with about 1.5% of our customers choosing to opt out of the AMI meters.
And Ms. Miller, but there's been a system-wide analysis too, now that you're almost 100% deployed, that everything still seems to be kind of working fine.
In the city of New Orleans, yes.
My other questions have to do with the customer service centers, particularly when people receive notices for a disconnection. I've been to the customer service centers where there's been lines and lines of people outside. Sometimes it's, extremely cold or it's raining, and people are told to come to the customer service center. What's being done so that customers can handle these situations over the phone so that they're not missing work, they're not, having to find other alternatives for caring for their children to be at an Energy customer center for most of the day. So tell me what you're doing to fix that situation.
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Moreno. And I do recall my pain and your pain and Deanna Rodriguez's pain as we were seeing those customers who were lined up around the walk-in centers here in New Orleans during the time. And I think you're referring to the period following Hurricane Ida when customers were trying to come in and get their bills paid or set payment arrangements. And I will tell you that at the time our call center was not performing at its optimal level. And as I discussed earlier, that was one of the first things that we realized that we had to address to make sure that customers could get access when they called us over the phone. What I think, I want to make sure everybody understands is that those customer care centers are there to manage a certain volume, but most of those customers do call in normally, all right? And so what you were seeing was an influx of customers that would normally call in. And that was one of the first things this new customer organization realized that they had to address. And as I stated earlier, we've added new call center agents to be able to handle more call volume. And since mid-December, we've been down to 120 seconds or less per call. And we have seen the impact. Our customers are getting service, and we're not seeing the overrun at our walk-in centers at this time.
But I'll say this, part of the problem also was that, and I talked to, many customers of mine who had this issue and I just want to make sure this has been taken care of. So that they were being told over the phone when they were trying to deal with disconnection notices that their issues were not handled on the phone and therefore were being sent to the customer care centers. So my question is about, are you expanding that can be taken over the phone? That's really my question.
Yeah. So you broke up a little bit there on me, but I think I understood the spirit of what you were trying to ask. And yes, we actually are making sure that our agents understand what the issues are that our customers are calling in about, because some of that is a training issue, as you're talking about. When our customers call us, we want them to be able to get a resolution on that first call, not have to call back, not necessarily even have to walk into our walk-in centers. So absolutely, we are expanding our training and making sure those customers are qualified. Those agents are able and qualified to answer our customers' questions when they first call into the call centers.
And I hope you can hear my last question here, but for individuals who are having trouble paying their bills, are you giving them information about LIHEAP and also about, additional potential opportunities to get assistance with their billing through the rental assistance program? Are you all providing this information to them so that they can sign up then?
Absolutely. We want to make sure our customers have information about LIHEAP, about Power to Care programs that we run internally, also to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And we understand there's more funding that's coming through the state as well. So we have a team that's keeping our eye on the pulse of all of those organizations, Catholic Charities, United Way. We work with them all to make sure that we can provide information to our customers about resources available to them.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you, Ms. Miller. Entergy, whether you go back to Alvin Garibaldi and Alex Dunn and Preston Favorite and Sandra Diggs Miller, and you guys always had the best customer service of most agencies in the city that we dealt with. So there was always a sense of pride in how you guys dealt with people. So I haven't been around to kind of see where things have gone awry or why maybe that's different now. But one thing I do know at your customer service stations, it's not going to work too well with the public if you have long lines and two people, or long lines and one person to wait on people. And I use those centers. And too often, there is a service center full of people, and there's maybe one person dealing with the line, or maybe two people if it's a very long line. Is that because you guys don't have enough people? The breaks are not coordinated in a timely fashion, or is that just a function of that individual customer service center?
So thank you for that question, Councilmember Thomas. I will tell you that at our service centers, we are looking at some challenges as it relates to having a number of agents who can service the customers, especially due to COVID. Following COVID, we had to really change the format and structure, how we were able to service our customers to not only keep our employees safe, but to keep our customers safe. And so as we transition out of the kind of the COVID space and we're able to put more agents, next to each other, closer and closer environments, we should see some improvements there. But we did recognize that there were some impacts to our service when we're having to space out, when customer service representatives could sit in proximity to one another.
So you guys are addressing those challenges.
Yes, and I think that we're going to, look at resourcing as well as we're going forward. Sometimes you do have turnover and you have to, take a little time to fill that spot. And so, but I think as we go forward, especially as we get beyond the pandemic impact, that we'll see some improvements in the number of agents that we're able to put in one location at one time.
Okay, one of the worst things in the world is already have an issue that challenges you because of your power, your utility, or your ability to pay or not to pay. But then to get to the center and have a long line only because you have one person, two people, and you have all of these different bays set up to service people, but no one being there, or two people rolling out while one person stays, or two people in the back talking while one person waits on people. I think customer relations would be served a whole lot better if that part of the customer service was managed better, especially given you guys' historical reputation. I mean, there was a time when nobody did it better than Energy. Even if there was a problem, the problem was handled with at least with some customer service, some care, and some consideration. Next thing about, I know very few people who would have 99% accuracy in anything. Is that because of your own evaluation process, or is that an external evaluation process? Who determined how accurate you guys are?
So I can take that. We do internal evaluation through the controls that we have set in place. There is a review that we do also work with our internal audit group that will come in.
Okay, you determine how right y'all were.
In addition to the audit review that we have as well. So there is a third-party audit that comes in and does a review on us annually as well.
So what part of customers' input or have to do with your evaluation process?
So I'm not quite following that question.
It has a 99.1% billing accuracy. The billee or the biller, what about the billee? How do they guys rate your billing accuracy? The person who's receiving the bill.
Gotcha. So
I mean, that's your
billing
customer.
is correct. Yeah. The
Customers
customer bill
always
is
customer first, right? I mean, that's the history.
Customer first, absolutely.
Yeah, that's how Energy used to be.
The bill is based off of the customer's usage. So the meter that is set at the customer house is what determines what the bill is.
But can I add anything here, Councilmember Thomas? Yeah, so there is a process by which we get feedback from our customers regarding how we're doing in a number of areas. One in the area in particular is the billing and payment. That experience for our customers is important. You're right. Outage is one thing. We want to hear, what they're thinking in a number of spaces. But the billing and payment experience for our customers is so important. We want to hear what they have to say. And we rate ourselves. We don't rate ourselves. They rate us. And we look at those numbers in comparison to other utilities to see how we compare and, whether it's good and whether it's bad. And so those are some of the things that we look at all the time, and we're listening to the voice of the customer as well. So yes, we do evaluate ourselves based on customer feedback.
Well, I learned so much from other people, man. I wouldn't know anything but what other people teaching me. And when you talk about dealing with people, especially when you have customers, it really doesn't matter how right you think you are. It really doesn't matter how accurate you think you are. If the purpose, and I see too much of that happening in the government right now. People think they're wonderful because they're wonderful. Well, the people you're servicing, and I'm not saying you guys aren't, because the history of energy and customer service, and Sandra, you've been at this a long time. You guys, I mean, y'all always set the standard, but I see too many agencies rating each other or rating themselves on how well they think they are, and the customer is somewhere on another planet. And just as a teachable moment, especially in the customer service business, and especially in an essential service that people have to have, I think it's more important to know how they feel and how they rate you, so you can get to a standard, at least that may not be perfect, but at least you understand how they feel while you're working on your deliverables.
And that's right, Councilmember Thomas. And that's in large part why we've created this new customer organization, to make sure that we can understand our customers' experience and to deliver a better experience. Because you're right, Entergy New Orleans has enjoyed a history of great customer service, but we also recognize that we're in a period of time right now where we have a lot of technology that we're deploying all at one time, and that there is, maybe some bumps along the way. And we're going to get there. We're going to get to that end journey, but there's some work that we have to do in the meantime. And our customers are feeling that strain of the new technology upgrades as we're trying to integrate those into our systems. So this new customer organization is going to help us make sure we're delivering a better experience. And so that's where we're headed.
All right, well, Sandra, what did you say?
I was going to say that, to your point, listen to the customer. Customers who have concerns or problems, call us. We're working on that call center wait time. Call us if you have questions. And again, walk us to our care center. And we're going to be very cognizant of your feedback today regarding the number of bodies and location, to make sure we are providing optimal service, even at those walk-in locations. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I tell people here at City Hall all the time, they get upset when people call because they need their help. Well, if people didn't need your help, you wouldn't have that job for people to call. And these are some very trying times. And, I'm glad that you guys could rate yourself 99.1. But, the public rating is really the only rating that really matters. And, whether the lights can come on when we turn them on and off, when you can light the pilot, when you're trying to get some gas. And that's all about the people we represent. Thank you. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
Mr. Chair,
I'm guessing you told me to go to public comment.
also on mute.
That is correct. Sorry.
Got it.
But before I make comment, I know there's 2 public comments, so I'd like to get those in first.
You got it. The first public comment is from Deisha Greeley. She says, how is Entergy partnering with the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans to bring about affordable cost of power to the residents' households, because many aren't seeing the change? Why is there an increase in many of our household billing? The second comment is from Kamalita McKee. She says, did the city of New Orleans ever clarify if Entergy used the new New Orleans East facility paid for by New Orleans taxpayers to provide energy for surrounding jurisdictions? Those are all the comments.
Okay. I think that those are some comments that we might need to get answers on at a different time, because I don't think they both directly are on point with this topic matter. But I do want to make a couple of comments. I do appreciate the presentation. I do appreciate that Entergy is now utilizing Mr. Ellis to be like the chief customer service person. I do think with the advent of technology, in particular, with the amount of information that Entergy has regarding its customers and their usage, what has not happened and what needs to happen is really that based upon users' past usage and past arrears and bills, I think that maybe what we need to focus on as a regulator dealing with energy is why can't we resource the public before they get to being in arrears? If you have, as a Council President Moreno highlighted previously, if we have a variety of programs that are out there that are both funded by Entergy and other groups to mitigate people who are struggling with their bills, why are we waiting for people to get in arrears to make them aware of the programs when if we have all this robust technology, you have their entire customer service history, you have their usage history, you have the trends as far as their usage is going up, and you see that there is a peak, that the usage and the cost is a complete break from their previous usage and costs. And you see that if someone's used to paying $200 a month, but based on their current usage, it's tracking towards $400-500 per month. Why aren't we actively engaging them on the front end to say, can we get you with Energy Smart? Can we figure out how we can address these issues before it gets to the point that they're getting balloon bills? Because there's really no point in having this degree of technology or for a company to dedicate to a customer service representative if we're not going to be innovative at all. And I think that a basic level of innovation, I mean, if Google can tell me based upon how many socks I buy that I need more socks, that Entergy should be able to tell someone who has a history of low usage and is starting to have spikes that before we get to a point where you have several hundred multi-$1,000 bills, how can we intervene with you to help you figure out how we can lower your bill before it gets to the point where you can't pay it? Because I like all the programs. I've been briefed all the programs we have in the city and they're fantastic. But if you're already behind the 8 ball because your power's already been cut off once and you've got several $1,000s in back billing, then learning about Energy Smart at that point, it's like being told that there's aspirin after you have cancer or something. It seems like you're well beyond the point of when that would have been helpful. So I think that as we continue to move forward on this issue, I think what I'm telling you as the chair of utilities, and I think I speak for my colleagues, is that we're not going to measure you based upon what you've done historically. We're going to measure you based on what you can do. And we know you can do these things. You can go there and, like you said, you have all the customer service information, you have all their billing history and usage history. You have that data. Why can't Entergy be more proactive utilizing that data to get people into programs sooner rather than later when it could really avoid very tragic instances in which you have little old ladies calling their council members crying because they're historically at a $100 bill. They had a couple of $200 bill months and now their power's being cut off. And I mean, it's not to say that on a very basic level, if we're being, complete oil baron capitalists, that, yeah, they owe the money for that bill, but it's more of an issue of we should not be patting ourselves on the back with all these alternative resources if we're not front loading people with them. So that's my position on this. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the dedication to having a specific person in the company who's tasked with this role, but our expectation as a council is going to be upon you figuring out proactive solutions, because none of us wants to be in that position where we're calling you because a single mother with 3 kids has got a disconnect notice because they spiked over 3 months when historically they've never seen those kind of bills. And that's not really meant, that's more of a comment than a question. I'm more telling you that next time we have a meeting like this and we see people with these very large bills, I want to be able for you guys to present, here's our new program where we are proactively making people aware of assistance before they get to these bills that are untenable. Because using that example of the single mom with 3 kids, when that bill gets to a certain point, she'll never be able to pay it. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, it'll get to a point where it'll be, do I pay my rent? Do I feed my kids? Or do I pay Entergy? And then we got her the resources on the front end of having them come in, check the house, make sure that it was energy efficient, make sure that things were being done differently in the home, make sure they're on appliances, and just making sure that we are doing everything we can do as a company for you and as a regulator from us to avoid the spike bill. I would hope that we, first off, hope we don't have multiple meetings like this, but if we are, that you are able to tell me about these new proactive programs that y'all are working on to try and resolve these issues.
If I may, Councilmember Morales?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that feedback. And I can tell you that throughout the pandemic, it's been tough on our customers, and we recognize that. A number of customers, especially during the time we hit the moratorium, just fell behind in paying the bills and have amassed large balances. And you're right, so the arrears are there. So there's that fine line there between, hey, making sure that we're understanding what the customer's needs are. We've had instances where customers have walked in and said, hey, we understand now we have to pay the bill, so they're paying the entire amount. But we have many customers who have needs, and we have proactively sent a number of our customers who are in arrears text messages, emails, phone calls, just to make sure they know about these programs. But to your point, where we are heading to, and we're hoping that this, and we know this new customer organization is going to help us with this, is to do some of the things that you suggest, is to be able to create ways that we can notify customers that, hey, look, your bill seems to be going up. And also right now, there are tools for our customers on our My Entergy website where they literally can monitor their bill each day. And they can see when their bill is going to increase. There are some things that we're working on to be able to help our customers predict their monthly bill. And so, but yeah, to your point, as those tools are enhanced and provided, we will make sure that you are aware of them and our customers were aware of them as well.
Okay, and before I get to Councilmember Thomas, I know he's got some cleanup. When I was in high school, I always enjoyed the teachers that graded me on my best work based upon what I was capable of, not my best work as compared to everyone else. And I just want to reiterate, I'm grading energy on what they can do, not what they're doing. So I look forward to you briefing us in the future on what you're doing to be more proactive on this, because I know what you're capable of, and you're not there yet. You're getting there. And I think having acknowledging you need a customer service person at that level is a great part of it. But I plan on this council is going to grade you on what you can do, not versus what you're doing. So Councilmember Thomas, for some comments.
I just wanted to apologize for not saying Happy Valentine's Day, and God bless you guys, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Very sweet. All right, so I think that's all we have for this item. So we'll be going to our next item. Thank you, representatives, for your presentation. Next up, we have the presentation on the 2021 Mardi Gras outage investigation. And I think this will be presented by our advisors. So Aaron, you can direct traffic now.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to pull up the presentation and then turn it over to our advisors. It looks like Clint Vance is ready.
Thank you, council members, and good morning. Thank you, Aaron. And I'm joined today. My name is Clint Vance, and I chair Denton's energy practice. We serve as legal advisors to the City Council for regulation of energy. And I'm joined by my teammate, Basile Udo, today from our New Orleans office, and also Joe Rogers, who is the lead technical advisor for the council. We're focused today on a event that occurred nearly a year ago during Mardi Gras, during Winter Storm Uri, when there was an unusually cold weather event, and the regional grid operator instructed Entergy to conduct a load shed operation. Load shedding in just plain English means that the regional grid instructs a local utility to shut off power to a portion of the customer base in order to protect the integrity of the full system, to protect the grid from crashing. In this situation, the load shed should have been pretty moderate. But unfortunately, what happened due to several errors by Entergy really falls into two serious missteps. First, Entergy shed about 4 times the load that was needed for New Orleans. And secondly, they had a major communications problem where they did not tell New Orleans customers that the load was going to be shed, that their service was going to be cut off temporarily until an hour and 40 minutes into the load shed, when actually the event was ending. The customers needed to receive that information at the front end or in advance. And it was known to the utility, so that suggestion is not inappropriate. And this becomes serious. It becomes a serious event because, as the council well knows, if you're dealing with vulnerable customers, the elderly or people on medical apparatus, not to have forewarning of an event like this can have really serious, unacceptable consequences. So the council conducted an immediate meeting after this circumstance, and they prioritized it. They had 2 major standing committees. At that time, President Moreno's was chairing the Utility Committee, and Joe Giarrusso was chairing the Public Works Committee. They conducted a joint meeting, and all 7 members of the council showed up and treated the issue with great urgency. Unfortunately, at the time of that meeting, Entergy did not treat the issue with urgency. They sent a very new employee who had not, couldn't possibly have had the operational experience to fully understand this sophisticated computer programs and communication issues. What complicated the situation was that it involved the whole Entergy system. So there were decisions being made by operating companies outside the council's jurisdiction that were like Entergy Louisiana, that were impacting New Orleans customers adversely and inappropriately. This was not intentional, but it was being done just by a series of errors and lack of proper preparation. And similarly, Entergy was communicating to the community too late and giving information that was general in nature, might have had application to customers in the Entergy Louisiana system or elsewhere, but it wasn't tailored to New Orleans, so that New Orleans customers weren't getting the information they needed on a timely basis. So the council conducted initially a forensic investigation. We discovered these 2 categories of problems, reported them to the council, and the council then ordered much more extensive investigation and instructed the advisors to come up with solutions so that this type of thing could never happen again. And we have done that. You will hear first in a moment from Joe Rogers, your lead technical advisor, on the computer programs and flaws and errors in that regard. And we have 8 specific and systemic recommendations to solve those problems. And then you'll hear from Basile Udo on the communications side, and we have, again, a systemic solution to make sure that communications by Entergy are tailored for the New Orleans community and allow your constituents and Entergy's customers to have proper warnings so that they are not in a vulnerable situation. So I'll ask Joe Rogers to take over now and walk us through his recommendations. Joe, you're on mute.
Thank you, Clint. And good morning, Utility Chair and council members. I'm Joseph Rogers, I'm President of Legend Consulting Group Limited, and Technical Advisor to the City Council. As Clint mentioned earlier, MISO called for a 700 megawatt load shed across all of MISO South. Eno's share of that load shed was 26 megawatts, but through programming data and measurement errors, Eno actually shed 105 megawatts rather than 26 megawatts. And this resulted in roughly 18,000 customers losing power unnecessarily. Two of the causes of these errors were, one, the primary cause of the load shed to a majority of customers was that an Entergy Louisiana load shed program erroneously included Eno feeders and Eno loads in that load shed program. There was also additional errors in reading actual load at the time of the event. And just to step back for a second, the load shed program implements a load shed plan. And essentially the program targets the amount of megawatts it needs to shed. And then it starts stepping through the feeders in the load shed program until it reaches that load. And so the inability to actually read some of the loads at the time of the load shed event caused the program to go on to the next feeder, and that's what increased the load shed. Next slide, please. During the investigation, I'll also say that we issued multiple rounds of discovery questions, and we received and reviewed thousands of pages of responses. Some of the other things that we found during our investigation is that the development and updating of the classifications on distribution feeders was inadequate and not conducted properly. Essentially what happens is in the load shed plan, they have got critical customers. They rank their customers from least critical to most critical. And what ended up happening was Eno ended up disrupting several critical customers, including the Sewage and Water Board, which should have been on the critical customer list, but was not. We also saw, as we reviewed the data, that there were technical flaws which allowed higher classification feeders to be disruptive ahead of lower classification feeders. And the last thing that we saw in general was that Eno was unable to validate the amount of load shed in real time. And why that's an issue is if you were the load shed program, it happens very fast. The load shed program goes through its process very quickly. And if you could have seen that too much load was being shed by the load shed program, maybe perhaps something could have been done to stop the excessive load shed. The way the rest of this, we've got recommendations in this presentation and in our advisor report to correct these issues and ensure that they don't happen again. But I'd like to turn it over to Bazile Udo of the legal counsel to talk a little bit about communications issues.
And Bazile, you're muted also.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair Morrell and members of the committee and the council. The communications issue, as Clint pointed out, was significant because it allowed people to be caught off guard about some of the stuff that was happening. And our investigation determined that there were several communications deficiencies, but the main problem was the total reliance by ENO on centralized communications that are controlled by Entergy Services Company and other Entergy companies through a shared services agreement that's been around for decades, and isn't a bad thing, but it puts E&O in the position as being the smallest company in the system of having to make sure that they're not ignored in the process. And what happened here is that the centralized messaging did ignore E&O's specific information in deference to information about other parts of the state. And E&O didn't correct that during the event. And so this led not only to a lack of New Orleans specific information, but it allowed confusing and incorrect messaging to go to New Orleans customers. In addition, E&O failed to provide the council or Curo with any useful information until the event was already underway, and even that was not clear and useful. In fact, Councilmember Moreno tried to get some information out that she received as the incident started, but it was not very clear information that she was passing on because they didn't give her very good information. It wasn't until after the event had ended that any New Orleans specific information got more broadly disseminated. Next slide, please, Aaron. So that kind of brings us to our general conclusions. The advisors concluded that there was substandard conduct on the part of E&O, both in technical and communications issues. And that led the advisors to develop the recommendations that Joe referred to. We have 9 remedial actions for council consideration to deter these events from recurring in any future load shed event. So I would give back to Joe and let him just briefly go through the technical recommendations.
Thank you, Bazil. And I'll try and be respectful of the council's time and just try and summarize these recommendations. Each of the recommendations are in the report in more detail. Our first recommendation speaks to development of a comprehensive E&O load shed plan. And what we mean by comprehensive is one that includes all feeders and has the feeders properly ranked with respect to their priority. The load shed plan in effect at the time of the event only had 42 feeders, and there's over 200 feeders in E&O's system. Our second recommendation speaks to a cross-company review. We want a comprehensive cross-company review of the E&O load shed program. And the reason why it needs to be cross-company is it needs to reflect that E&O and Entergy Louisiana have reviewed the load shed programs and how they operate. And that would have, had that cross-company review been done, it might have been caught that there was the E&O feeders in the L load shed program. Next slide, please. Our third recommendation speaks to additional, sorry. Did somebody have a question? Our third recommendation speaks to additional simulation and testing of these load shed programs. Computer programs are routinely tested in external environments to make sure that the expected input results in the expected output. And we think that that can be improved by E&O doing some additional testing of their load shed programs. We also want specific documentation and guidelines for the load shed program and the load shed plan review process. We want active E&O staff assigned, and they need to sign off on it. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 5 speaks to the distribution feeder load measurement review and improving preventative maintenance. Preventative maintenance may have prevented some of the issues with respect to load measurement that caused the excessive load shed. And after the event, did do a comprehensive review of the 42 feeders on the load shed plan. But we believe that that type of comprehensive review should be done company-wide. The other thing is we would like to see documentation documenting a procedure for a critical customer and feeder priority classification annual review process. We think that they do have a process in place, but we think it can definitely be improved. Recommendation 7, next slide, please. As part of the documentation, it needs to list responsibilities of staff positions related to emergency events. One of the things that we saw during the load shed event is that there was no direct appeal to individual large customers to reduce load. We think that if that would have been done, it could have mitigated some of the need to shed megawatts on Eno's system and could have mitigated some of the impact to some of the customers. Recommendation 8 speaks to the real-time ability to see what the load is, such that as the people in the distribution center are watching the load and watching the load shed, that they can see that either too much load is getting reduced or not enough load is getting reduced and act to correct it in a more timely manner. I'd like to turn it back to Basile now for some recommendations with respect to communications.
Thanks, Joe. On communications, the advisors recommend that the council direct E&O to develop a New Orleans-specific emergency communication plan. And it's a plan that has to assure simple, concise, and usable localized information that gets to customers, the council, and Curo in a timely fashion, which is critical, and that has to be built into this plan. And the plan must also assure that E&O-specific communications get pushed out through all available channels, traditional media, social media, direct messages, E&O's website and app, because that wasn't the case last February, and it, I think, added to the confusion. And it has to be made easy for the customers to get the information, because a lot of the information that went out last year, the customer would have to go seek it out somewhere. They were being referred to links on a website that they'd have to go through several iterations of links before they got to specific information. So this plan would have to address that and take the burden off the customer to get the information through all of the available channels of communication. And that's I think, the end of our recommendations and the end of our report.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. Mr. Thomas, your hand was up first.
First of all, guys, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for the report. For the public out there, this may sound kind of complicated, but load sharing is from your home generator to those businesses that may use them to public utilities. And if it weren't for load sharing, especially systems of grids that worked effectively, we'd have Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island all over this country. So my question is, was their inability to have proper load sharing, was it because of their system, because of the grid, or just system failure?
It was actually Councilmember Thomas' failure to properly plan and have their computer simulations running correctly. They hadn't done a load shed event in about 20 years. And they just, to Chair Morell's earlier point, they hadn't upgraded their system to current day information and opportunities. And so it was just one technical error after another and they did not have self-awareness of it until the council conducted its investigation. The other thing is, Councilmember Thomas, is that the communications used very technical jargon that it would take Joe Rogers really to decipher the communications we were receiving from Entergy New Orleans. They were just repeating technical jargon from the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator instead of information that a typical customer could easily understand, which is why Bazile framed his last recommendation the way he did.
All right, so let's talk about that oversight. And I wrote some things down. I was following your report, but some of this should have kind of been common sense to me, especially given the extreme weather occurrences that we've had. And I think we had something called Katrina. I think that happened. I think Entergy was here during Katrina. So what about preventive maintenance? Just a preventive maintenance plan, right? Especially given anyone who's followed this knows the whole North American or southern part of the grid hasn't been up to par for decades. So if you can't rely on that system, you definitely have to make sure you rely on your system. So did they not have a preventative maintenance plan, or especially given the fact that we've experienced severe weather events in the past?
I think you've zeroed in on the fundamental problems.
Think I did?
Yes, sir. We shouldn't be surprised any longer by extreme weather. It's now predictable, and it's occurring more frequently with greater intensity. We've had greater winter storms even in the Gulf states. And of course, I don't need to tell you all about Hurricane Ida. So this is a level of preparation that needs to be upgraded immediately. That's why the council has put this level of interest and instruction to us to get this changed.
Yeah, but that brings me to a greater point. And I think it's something that I'm kind of following, being kind of back, and I'm learning so much. But being kind of back in this particular saddle, how we have to kind of remind people to do their job or expect different systems and agencies to do their job. It's just like communication. I'm sure they had an emergency communication plan after Katrina, right? Because we learned a lot from that. Where's that booklet?
Councilman Thomas, that exists. The problem that we found is that that's part of the shared services agreement that they have. And it's a very elaborate emergency communications plan. And there's one that's specifically for load shedding. The problem is that E&O is such a small part of Entergy. The way that plan played out in an emergency was they basically elbowed E&O out, and all the messaging was more tailored to other parts of the state. So what we saw was E&O, as the smallest part of the system, wasn't properly represented or protected in the way communications were developed and sent out. And E&O locally apparently didn't have the authority to do the changes they needed to do to make it more localized. So they have a pretty elaborate communications manual. It just isn't best suited for E&O, and that's why our recommendation is that E&O has to have one that localizes all that information.
Okay, so Entergy Louisiana treated E&O like a stepchild, and E&O treated our citizens like an orphan.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Okay, so then where was the oversight? We've had weather events before, we've had emergency weather situations before, and what I don't understand is that, so we have to have an investigation on stuff that should automatically happen in standard business, especially if you've been faced with these events before. So which means every time there's another event, you're going to have another investigation or come out with another 9-point plan or a new plan when there's should be oversight and action already. So what's the surprise? What's
Well,
most surprising?
I mean, the surprise here was that this communications plan for load shedding had never really been used before. They have a different communications program for weather events. And this is the first time, at least impacting New Orleans, that there was communications related to a load shed event. So this was a first.
So it's basically contained within the system, nothing to do with the former Southwest Systems Agreement or them being part of that. This or their lack of, or the lack of response or preventative maintenance didn't have anything to do with backing out of that agreement, right?
It's actually a newer arrangement with a Mid-Continent Independent System Operator that changes the entire way the grid is operated, which is newer. But I think your point on oversight is very well taken.
Councilmember Thomas, I mean, I think if the E&O people are still on, they might be in the better position to answer your question.
Yeah, and I'm learning so much. Especially some of this stuff is kind of old, or should be old in terms of what our natural response would be, given it's not new. I don't want to belabor this. They have so many more people who are closer to this than I am. So, what's the remedy? So, is the remedy in the grid, in the system, in the company, in technology, research and development, doing something else? What's the remedy?
I think you need. Go ahead, Joe.
On the technical side of things, the remedy is getting the appropriate procedures and processes in place with ENO specific people assigned to thoroughly understand and thoroughly check what needs to happen when a load shed plan goes into when a load shed goes into effect. This load shed was ordered for all MISO South utilities, 700 megawatts, of which ENO's share was 26 megawatts. What needs to happen is ENO needs to take hold of the reins, both on the load shed side of things and the communication side of things, and thoroughly document what needs to be done each year so that nothing slips through the cracks.
So Mr. Rogers, was this an anomaly, a phenomenon? Was this the first load shed in the history of public utility?
This was not the first load shed in the history of public utilities, but in relative to ENO, it was probably the first one in recent times.
Okay, I got more stuff, but I think I can wait and maybe have some questions for the company. Thank you guys very much. I don't want to be late.
Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Druso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, I guess, start with the points made by Councilmember Thomas, which is I can understand wanting to centralize communication, but it seems to me that the ability of the local provider to get on the ground information and do so quickly is critically important. And my hope is, without conflating two separate issues, we have URI and we had a communications problem in IDA too. And so my strong suggestion at this moment is those communication issues start to be grappled with more locally, so people on the ground have the nimble ability to react to them in as close to real time as possible. And I think the findings from the advisors said something like being proactive and timely are not mutually exclusive concepts. And I couldn't say it any better than that. The second thing for me too, as a point of emphasis, I hope while everybody's looking at this, is that sewage and water board feeders were not considered to be a part of the critical infrastructure. That's, I think, Mr. Vince, you pointed out why we had the joint meeting between Public Works and Utilities, because of the concern about that. I want to make sure that as we start working on the substation, that the feeders or transmission lines into that are considered the highest critical condition that can be granted, because what we don't need in a load shedding event is power to the substation being cut before something further down the priority list is. So that's it for me. I just wanted to chime in on those 2 cents. And Councilmember Thomas, thank you for those comments, because I think you stand where we all do in terms of trying to make sure that communication piece that's so important to our residents is top of mind. Thank you.
Council President Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't want to rehash, everything that happened, during this whole situation, but I do think it's important to give a little bit of background on what happened during this load shed, so that we have an understanding of what everyone's roles are supposed to be. The council is the regulator of Entergy New Orleans, but when this load shed event happened, that night, I was getting calls from, at the time, the former CEO of Entergy about what was happening. At the same time, also learning from Sewage and Water Board that they were having some issues with power. Neither had been talking to each other. Obviously, I had to make the connection to bring the two together. At the same time, there was very little communication going out to the public as to why some people were starting to lose their power. So instead, council members went on their social media platforms and started putting out communication that there was a load shed occurring. And so, the city council is not the communications department for Entergy New Orleans, but unfortunately that night it had to operate in that way. We're always willing to assist, but clearly there was a big breakdown there when it came to communications between other agencies within the city. And there was also communications issues between the company and getting information out to the public and the media. One of the issues that we saw is that there had to be all these different checks that Entergy New Orleans had to go through before they could even put something out on social media, before that news release could get approved. So since that time, we have asked that that process be, of course, like sped up, and that there would be a faster, not only a faster pace, but really a faster approval pace that could happen just within Entergy New Orleans to get critical information out to the public. As we fast forward to the different hearings that occurred because of this event, we, and Joe Rogers mentioned this, and so did Clint, about when we realized that instead of 26 megawatts that was supposed to be shed, and then initially we thought it was about 80 megawatts that was shed. We found out that it was much more than that at 105 megawatts shed. That information was actually revealed at a public committee meeting of the Utilities Committee. And that was the first time that the Entergy New Orleans CEO had found out that it was 105 megawatts. So there's communication issues even within the company, leading all the way up to the CEO, that we found to be really concerning and problematic, that the CEO himself had not been aware of just how severe this situation was, this mistake had been, as far as the difference between the 26 megawatts that was supposed to impact the E&O region to being all the way to 105 megawatts. So that leads us to, of course, the inquiry which our advisors have done, and the conclusion of this. And my questions are now going to be to Entergy, because this particular report was released on October 1st and publicly, and Entergy was able to have the opportunity to respond. So my question to Entergy is, how far along are you on the recommendations that the advisors have put out there? And anyone from the Entergy team can respond. Hey, Brian, I see you. I can't hear you though. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I just learned how to work the mute button. Let me pick these up before they switch back over to my headphone. Okay, sorry about that. So thank you for the opportunity to address that question, Councilman Moreno. We have started taking sort of proactive action immediately following our internal investigation into some of the events that happened on the Mardi Gras outage. We, just to take the corrective actions in buckets. When we talk about the load shed program issue, we agreed that essentially what happened there was a breakdown in communications between the different groups that were responsible for implementing a load shed plan. And so we did implement the cross-functional review process that Mr. Rogers referenced. And what that allows is for each group within Entergy, especially those at E&O with responsibilities for distribution, and Ms. Sandra Miller in customer service, and several other groups, that allows them to review the information that was implemented into that IT program and confirm that it was correct. And so that is something that we have implemented. The next one related to the data entry error on the load shed program was to recommend a specific type of testing. We found that essentially there was no testing, across the utility industry related to this specific point, because as Mr. Rogers mentioned, while there have been load shed events in the past, it's been over 20 years. We can't even pinpoint the exact date, but it's been over 20 years since the last load shed event occurred on the Entergy system. And so there's not a lot of muscle memory in relation to these load shed events, but we did in the past year work on creating a test. So we had our IT people actually develop a test, and now that's being implemented, and we are in the process of creating a process within that test that would eliminate the issue that happened back last Mardi Gras. So we also have we created a dashboard that would allow our monitors at the DOC to validate the amount of load that was shed in each jurisdiction. And so that was something that came from the advisor's recommendation. We didn't have that technical capability before, but we basically invented the software and we made that happen. So those are three things related to the data entry issue that was sort of at the heart of the advisor's recommendations, and those are things that we've already begun to implement. The load measurement issue, and that's basically a situation where if the operator is asking for a feeder to be interrupted, the equipment at the substation basically talks back to the operator and says, yes, I have shed the amount of load that you've asked me to shed. And so what happened there was a calibration issue. There was nothing wrong with the equipment. It was just not calibrated. And so we went back and inspected all the communications equipment between the substations and our operators to make sure that they were accurate and calibrated. And so that's been taken care of. We also implemented a weekly test. And so we basically use the SCADA system that we have, the communication system, to test that equipment weekly. And so we know that there are no issues going forward with those communication, those measurement issues. The sewage and water board issue, obviously, that's very important. So we met with the sewage and water board, very shortly after the event, and we identified all load that they identify as critical, and we made sure that that load was taken off of the load shed list. And not only did we do that, but we went back, and Sandra and her group validated that all critical load is off of the load shed list at this point. And so at this point, the load shed list is comprised of all what we call priority 3 feeders, which are mostly comprised of residential feeders. And then we went back and we accepted the advisor's recommendation of including all available priority 3 feeders on the load shed list. And so the load shed list is comprised of as many feeders without critical load on it as possible. And so for the communications issues, we also heard the advisor's recommendations on that. There were some communications to customers ahead of the load shed event, but we accept that it could, obviously those communications could have been clearer, et cetera. So we've implemented a very streamlined process to where if MISO calls for, well, not even before MISO calls for a load shed event, it's basically the spectrum of steps that need to happen until you get to a load shed event. And so we identified specific triggers on that sort of ladder to where if we reach a step in the process well before a load shed event, it would trigger us to release those communications in a very streamlined manner to both the media markets and to our customers. And so, we think that we are sort of well underway in implementing some of the advisor's recommendations, and as well as some of the things that we proactively came up with ourselves. But obviously, we look forward to working with the advisors and the months ahead to implement some more of their recommendations, and just to confirm that we've done the things that they expected us to do.
So you mentioned many things just now, but recommendation 1 through 9, how far along are you with implementing the recommendations that the advisors put forward? Are you 30%, 50%? Where are you as far as the work you've done?
I'm sorry, council member. And so the things that I mentioned just now basically relate to almost all of the advisors' recommendations 1 through 9. I mean, I guess we're about 80% there, 90% there. And so we're looking forward to working with the advisors on that incremental 10% to get that done as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is one public comment that we have on this item before I make comment. So can we get that public comment on the record, Aaron?
Yes, sir. The comment is from Logan Burke, representing the Alliance for Affordable Energy as staff. She says, "Thank you, Council, for opening this docket and investigation of prudence into the outages that left thousands of New Orleanians in the cold a year ago. We have a concern that the Council's hands are tied when it comes to levying any fines for prudence at this time related to reliability due to the pending litigation. As a result of the $1 million fine levied by resolution number 19-442 in 2019, E&O filed a suit for injunctive relief against the Council, which nearly 2 years after the date of filing is still pending before the court. This outstanding litigation is a barrier to the Council taking firm action against imprudence in this and other problems of reliability, and we urge this Council and Council Utility Regulatory Office to do everything in your power to advance and resolve the litigation in order to reassert the Council's regulatory authority and ability to hold this utility accountable for neglectful management of the city's power infrastructure. Thank you." That is the comment.
Thank you, Aaron. We'd certainly appreciate your thorough investigation and the results. I do think that what I find particularly troubling is that though this sort of load shed event is new to New Orleans, my recollection, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Clint or Joe, is that well before this event, we had the event in Texas where there were other transmission issues and load shed issues. And we're aware throughout for the last couple of years in the West having load shed issues, and that this has been an ongoing issue across the country with climate change. So though this load shed issue is new to our region, it's not new to the country. It's something that's been increasingly happening, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my concern is I appreciate we have this report. We have a list of very, I think, on the nose kind of recommendations, but it goes back to my other comment in the previous situation, which is it's frustrating for us to be on the back end fixing problems that are foreseeable. And the load shed event, though it was new to New Orleans, with climate change happening across the country, it was foreseeable that we would eventually have a load shed event. And I guess my concern becomes, as a regulator, and this is for the advisors as well, do we now have to monitor national trends and tell ENO to do it in advance? Because I feel like that's kind of where this is headed, that if we see national trends of different things that are affecting different utilities and load shedding, I mean, I remember hearing the term load shedding back when I was hearing about Enron. That's how far back load shedding was as an issue. And California, like shutting down whole parts of the state for load shedding issues. This is not a new issue. It's a pretty well-traveled issue. I guess if that's our job as a regulatory agency, that we'd have to have Kiro working with the advisors to follow national trends and then proactively have to engage with energy to say, hey, are you guys doing these things that we see happening across the country? I mean, if that's something we need to do, then I hate signing myself up for more work, but we'll do it. But it seems like on this load shed event in particular, it was foreseeable, even though it was new. Am I wrong?
I think you're absolutely right. It was foreseeable, and it needs greater oversight. I will say that with Entergy's new leadership, we have received a much higher degree of cooperation on this. But I think we need to continuously monitor trends. But this is something that should be we shouldn't have to deal with. It's an operational issue for Entergy. They should be on top of it. I think they now are, but we will monitor it and make absolutely certain that the 100% of the recommendations are in effect. And we will consult with you, Chairman, and the other members of the council on trends that we're seeing as they develop, so that you can ask tough questions and make sure that Entergy is proactive going forward. And you're right about Winter Storm Uri. It impacted Texas, but they had a preview of that storm back in 2011. So they should have been prepared. The whole Gulf Coast was not properly prepared for Winter Storm Uri. And so I think your observations are right on target.
Well, I guess the last thing I would comment on is that we now know, unfortunately, throughout the country that, and we experienced it ourselves in the city when we had the cyber attack incident that led to pretty much the city of New Orleans being shut down technology-wise for about 6 months, that increasingly when I talk to people who are in the national security field, the reality of cyber terrorism targeting our utility providers is a real thing. Insofar as even as we have the United States Senate targeting Russia for its behavior in Ukraine, and there's already like open conversation saying, well, the Russians can't retaliate by putting sanctions on us, but they may retaliate with cyber terrorism and cyber attacks targeting things like our utility providers. This might be a Joe question versus a Clint question. I mean, how do we interact with our utility to make sure that they are at the higher levels of security and oversight as far as making sure our grid is protected? I mean, obviously, we're part of a larger network. I get that. And if there are shortcomings throughout MISO, we can't address those. But are we making sure as a regulator that our portion that we regulate is in fact secure?
I could probably respond to that, and Joe, you can chime in too. We have over the past few years had an undocketed matter related to physical and cybersecurity. it originally started based on physical security because there were some breaches of substations and things in the city that caused some problems, but it was expanded to include cybersecurity. And Joe's been a part of the meetings too, as has Curo. And we do have a process where we monitor that. We haven't had a meeting in about a year, so it's good to bring up and remind us. But we have, and I can say, Entergy's cybersecurity people, the people that head that up, pretty experienced, and their cybersecurity is pretty good. But it's worth continuing to make sure it stays that way. Of course, when you're dealing with that, and the original understanding from the council was that if there were issues, they'd all have to be handled in camera with council members, and you can't talk about vulnerabilities in a cyber system. But we have done that, and we do have information that on cybersecurity. And physical's improved. There were some issues. We identified them and they fixed them. But it is part of what we've looked at over the past couple of years. Joe, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a pretty good summary of where we're at with the cybersecurity. And I just would note that the cybersecurity people that on Eno's team that we have met with have impressed me.
I mean, they have like national credentials, so that they have pretty good cybersecurity people.
Well, it's certainly, and I think that might be something we could figure out how to. I certainly agree. Whenever you're discussing vulnerabilities, especially when it comes to technology, that's not something you ever want to do in camera because you're basically inviting people to test the security issues.
Right.
So I'm glad that's an undocumented matter. It might be something where. And Aaron, we could talk about this. We can periodically just do kind of a wellness check. We don't have to go into specifics, but I think that as the public pays more and more attention to that as an issue, considering the city of New Orleans obviously needed a cybersecurity upgrade about a year and a half ago. I think that making the public aware of something that we're continually keeping an eye on might be sufficient, just because I know that when I talk to people, it's an area of concern. Councilmember Russo has a question.
I have a comment to the point you made, council member, which is just the idea of regular health check-ins. And I know Energy does this regularly, but with hurricane season not far out of mind, unfortunately, and I see people starting to shake their heads as I say it, I just think maybe in March or April, we ought to have a check-in with Energy, with the city, with Sewage and Water Board, with telecom providers, and just make sure that we know what the hurricane plan is, because of knowing what we dealt with Ida and what could be coming this year or in the future.
Thank you for that comment. I don't see any other comments on this issue, so I will consider this presentation concluded. We will now go to number 5, which is the ENO financing application. The committee will consider a resolution to approve ENO's application to incur debt. I think it would be appropriate. I don't know how y'all want to structure this before Energy comes on. I think that it might help Clint, for somebody on the team, or Aaron, you could do it at the Curo office, explain this process and how it happens annually and so on and so forth for the public as they pay attention to it.
I mean, Councilmember, when you have Drew Brees, you don't send in the second string quarterback. So I'm going to defer to Joe Rogers.
But Joe, whoever it is, just go ahead and do it.
Thank you. We would never, as you'll get to know, Aaron is anything but second string, but Joe has handled this and we'll ask him to give you an overview.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, roughly every 2 years, ENO comes in for approval of its financing plan. What these financing plans do is they set the top debt level that ENO can go out and get debt for. These plans, both their financing plan has to be approved by the Council of the City of New Orleans, as well as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So they take a look at their what their expected outstanding long-term debt is going to be. They develop a capital plan, and then they come to the council and request an amount with a little bit of contingency that will cover what they feel is going to be their maximum outlay in their outstanding long-term debt. Currently, their financing level, that financing level is at 890 million. This request would increase that by 350 million for a total of 1.244 billion. We have reviewed, the information, and this would be a request for the period January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2023. We essentially, with respect to that, we propounded discovery requests on Eno to evaluate their financing plan. We looked at their capital budget. We looked at their expected equity ratio. Everything, appears reasonable to us. But I will note that, what we're approving here is if you guys opt to approve the new debt limit, you don't approve, council approval is not required for each of the individual debt issuances. You've approved, when you approve the limits, you approved up to a certain limit. Previous resolutions and the resolution that you have before you today ensures that when Eno does go out for debt, that you will be provided with all of the information on that debt issuance after they have secured the debt. One more thing, I guess a couple more things that I'll mention is that, simply approving this debt, doesn't change the council's authority in any way, shape, or form to oversee and regulate certain expenses of the company and the rates ultimately billed to customers. And I guess the last thing I'd probably mention is, their return on equity, their total debt that customers end up paying is based on their weighted average cost of capital. And that is a function of their return on equity and their return that they must pay on the debt. And so usually the debt that Eno is able to go out for is at a lower rate than what their ROE is. So it benefits customers for Eno to be able to go out for debt rather than doing it all with their equity. I hope that was helpful with respect to background.
It was a point of clarification before we get to Courtney. I do want to make the public aware that, in my understanding, Aaron, please correct me if I'm wrong, approving this debt limit does not remove the ability of the council to come back and make sure that any repairs or costs that are done are actually approved by the council subsequent to that. So basically, though we would approve them today of having an upper debt limit, that does not mean that they are entitled to reimbursement for everything they do. They still have to come back separately for reimbursement to go to ratepayers to refund that debt. Is that correct, Aaron?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Courtney, it's all yours.
Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry, I lost y'all for a second. My headphones just died.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Joe, a good summary. Let me put the headphones back in the case. Okay. All right. So Joe gave a really good summary. So just additional context, I wanted to make clear that essentially what we're asking for, because we have to go to finance operations and capital investments. So just because we're asking for this debt ceiling, it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll even reach that ceiling. We hadn't reached the ceiling that we set in the past, but we did ask for an increase just to maintain as much flexibility as possible. We've seen a lot more storms, just in the case of unplanned events, it's helpful for E&O to have as much flexibility as possible. But again, this is no guarantee that we're going to hit that ceiling or invest at that level. So I wanted to make that clarification for the council. But otherwise, this is a pretty routine matter, and it's just given us the financing authority to make sure that we're on the ready to finance our capital needs.
I don't see any questions. Are there any comments on this item, Ms. Spears?
Sir.
What's that?
No, sir.
Okay.
No comments.
And this requires action, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, then I will entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
All right. Okay.
Second.
All right. Aaron, can you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Chair Morrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Moreno,
Yes.
Councilmember Jeruso,
Yay.
Councilmember King,
Yay.
Councilmember Thomas. Okay, we have 4 yeas, no nays. The resolution is approved.
Aaron, that'll be forwarded to the entire council for a full vote, right?
Yes, sir. Because
Okay.
the resolution received unanimous approval, it's eligible to go on the consent agenda if that is the committee's desire.
Okay, we'll take that up at the end of the meeting. Next up, we have your report. So your last, Aaron. We have the presentation by Kuro regarding an update on the accomplishments, initiatives, and staff expansion. So it's all yours, Aaron.
All right, council members, I'm going to keep this pretty brief, but I will start with a happy Valentine's Day to all of you. Kuro has been pretty busy over the last few years. Last year alone, we managed 7 dockets. We maintained our advanced budgeting precedent by keeping all consultants on or under budget last year. Additionally, because of Kuro's expanded role, our engineer and myself, along with the advisors, were active participants in the E&O Sewage and Water Board Working Group. We also provide regular summaries of all the board meetings that the Sewage and Water Board has, which are available to the public online. This year, a lot of this is carried over from last year because of COVID and winter storms and hurricanes, but we are planning 3 pretty substantial code updates that will allow for us to implement an e-filing system. This will allow parties, stakeholders, interested people to see filings that are made in any docket online. So Chris Roberts in our office, along with Bobby Mason, is working to get that implemented, of course, with the support of ITI. We are going to update our wireline franchise agreements to ensure that they're in line with new technologies and that the city is able to enforce to the fullest extent of the law. And we're going to update our utility franchise agreement code section, which hasn't been updated in decades. So it's long overdue, particularly in the area of the fee structure. As you know, council members, we've been actively expanding our in-house staff. Currently, our staff is 5. However, we have a new policy director starting on March 7th, which I'm really excited about. We had a position open for the principal engineer. We're tweaking that a little bit to ensure that we bring in someone with electric and gas utility expertise. We also recently approved a legislative aid position. Thank you, council members. And we'll add a staff attorney and financial analyst. Hopefully, all of those positions will come on by the end of this year, early next year at the latest. And the 3 dockets that will come up this year are the 2022 formula rate plan, hopefully wrapping up the Hurricane Ida investigation, and a time of use docket. Council members, I yield the floor to you for any questions.
Aaron, just
Council President Moreno.
you. Aaron, I just wanted to say that you forgot to mention again that because of the way that you're taking so much in-house now and all the hiring in-house and obviously with the now support of Council Vice President Morales, chair of this committee, to continue in growing Curo, that you've saved millions of dollars in consultant costs to ratepayers. And I think that's really important to mention. And you don't give yourself enough credit for that, because that's the whole point of and big piece of you building the Curo office, is because at the end of the day, it leads to savings and it builds up our own right here, local and consistent expertise. So thank you for your work on that, Aaron.
Councilmember Moreno, thank you for that. I always, try to underestimate what's happened here, but yes, we are continuing to save money. I really appreciate the team that we have in-house and your support, council members, because we've brought in a lot of in-house expertise. We will continue to do that. And we let the advisors do what they do. We let them be Drew Brees. And, we just run the show a little bit more efficiently to ensure that ratepayers aren't bearing any unnecessary burdens financially. So thank you for that.
That is a great analogy, Aaron, considering Drew Brees is the most expensive person on a team. So that's a great.
Okay, I'm not a sports expert.
That's a good one for one analogy. But we appreciate your presentation. We appreciate everything Curo does. Obviously, it makes our lives tremendously easier because it's great to have you guys on deck at all times to answer questions and to brief council members. Aaron, we will add that item of the E&O financing application to the consent agenda. I've spoken to a high authority that we have a very lengthy council meeting on Thursday, and it is already very packed. So we'll add that to the consent agenda as it was passed unanimously. And with that, we have concluded all. Are there any other comments that we missed, Aaron?
Yes, sorry, my cursor got lost on the screen.
Okay.
There's one comment on this item.
Let's get that one comment on there, and then we can move for adjournment. So if that's good, that last comment up, Aaron.
Sure. The comment is from Brandon Henry. He's not a paid representative. He says, when are we going to see more competition from AT&T on broadband internet? Cox has a monopoly and seems to have little interest in improving service speeds or pricing. That is the comment.
That is an excellent comment. And I can tell you his name was Brandon, right?
Yes.
Brandon, we will tackle that issue at a future meeting. There obviously is a lot of concerns throughout the city regarding the stability of broadband and competition for broadband internet in particular, because people aren't talking about landlines anymore. So we will have a future meeting that just deals with both the reliability of internet and the lack of competition. We're meeting with the different representatives of the different companies to make sure everyone has a presence here and to show that the council is committed to providing as many alternatives as possible, especially alternatives that provide stable internet access at a reasonable rate. So that's not this meeting, but it will be a future meeting. We have not forgotten about it, and we're on top of it. With that, our agenda is clear.
Council Chair, also in a future meeting, can we also discuss how the city's Office of Utilities is really the one that's got oversight over the deployment of the 5G towers? We're getting a lot of complaints about that as well.
We will package that in there. Those very unattractive 5G towers that are going next to your house, those are being site selected, not by the city council. What we do is we set policy. Who implements that is, in fact, the city of New Orleans. So we hear your complaints about that too, and that will be added to the pile of stuff that we'll deal with in that meeting. We'll probably just tackle all of the internet connectivity stuff, whether it be in the ground or through the air. So we will take that under account. With that, our agenda is clear. Mr. King moves that we adjourn. Mr. Geruso seconds. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council members.